Hey, today we're going to be going over some of the basics of breathing. And hopefully by the end, we're going to go over some specifics of breathing in relation to the inner armor the inner armor training. So let's start with the main functions of breathing. So first and very most obvious is the oxygen supply. I think we all know that oxygen is needed for our cells to survive, and without breathing, our lives would cease within minutes. So don't need to go further on that. But a second function, which we may not always be aware of, is waste removal. So detox. We talk about detox a lot in our culture, but I don't know that we always think about breathing on the exhale is detoxing, and it's actually one of our largest detox mechanisms. Without breathing, exhale, we would actually live in a chronically ill state because the act of breathing brings unsterile air into our sterile being. So there's always risk there. We have certain prevention strategies within our respiratory system, but we do breathe in toxins, and we also have a toxin called carbon dioxide that we have to get rid of. And if we don't have a good exhalation process, we will have chronic illness because of the buildup of things in our body that we don't want. So those are our two main functions, and then some involved systems. We could argue every system because it's all connected so closely, but some of the main players are the respiratory system, obviously, the muscular system, the cardiovascular system, which cardiovascular includes one of our bigger muscles, which is the heart. Neurological system, huge connection there with the autonomic nervous system controlling the fight, flight, or the rest, digest, and that's kind of determining our respiratory rates. Endocrine system, super involved, as well as my favorite, the digestive system. So just FYI, if you don't breathe real well, you don't digest real well. So another motivating factor about the Inner Armor breathing program, it really does help with your digestive process, which helps everything else. So multi-organ system going on here. So let's move forward and meet the major players in the respiratory system. Obvious, the lungs. You have two of them. Interestingly, on the side of your heart, you have two lobes in that lung. On the other side, you have three lobes in that lung because you have a little more space on that side. The surface area of the lungs is the most important aspect. It's full of these tiny little alveoli, little balloons where the air exchange happens. And for those who like fun numbers, apparently we have 300 to 500 million alveoli, which would equate to the space of a pickleball court on each lung, or some people even say, if it's a larger human being, a tennis court space. So I have heard people say when the lung is not expanded, it's about the surface area of a ping pong table. So the importance of inhaling and expanding those lungs becomes really important when you think about the surface area is the determinant in how easily we exchange the gas. Another little side note is the importance of lung development. We can see it from the start of life. It is the number one predictor of premature survival with a very, very early baby. You would think it was the brain, you would think it was the heart, but it's actually the development of the lung that really tells if the baby will survive. So our understanding from the very beginning of life is that our life hinges on our lungs. The major muscle in breathing is the diaphragm muscle. Cool muscle. Different than any other muscle I know of in the body. It is shaped like a dome. And when you inhale, it contracts down into a flat muscle, and that pulls air down into the lungs. When you exhale, it goes back to the dome shape, and that pushes the carbon dioxide air out of your lungs. This muscle never gets to stop working, similar to the heart being a muscle that never gets to stop working. It is said to have the highest concentration of mitochondria in it. Some would argue the brain also super high in mitochondria, as well as the heart super high in mitochondria. We don't need to argue about it because we work with all three of those things at Inner Armor. And so we understand completely these are the hardest working spaces in our body, and we have to really, really hone in on them and curate them to be their best. The heart is the last major player, and the heart is the pump. It takes this oxygenated blood and moves it to the cells. So in some ways you got to include the heart in the respiratory system because it's the pump that gets the oxygen where it needs to go. So just for fun, the circulation distance within the body is something like 60,000 miles, which would go around the world 2.5 times inside of me. So that's kind of a crazy fact. 80% of that distance are these teeny tiny vessels. So it's really quite an amazing system, how it spans and gets around and delivers the product. Okay, let's take a quick look at the inhale. Starting the minute you inhale the air, your upper respiratory tract is your nose, your throat, down your throat, and going into your bronchi. You have 2 of those. So one going in each side of the lungs. All of those spaces have tons of moisture and cilia that is filtering and warming. Tons of circulation there, keeping it warm, because all of this air, 1, has to be cleaned because it's going into a sterile space. 2, has to be warmed and moistened because gas exchange will not occur without warming and moistening. So as the air comes down, goes into the bronchi where it splits from left to right, then it breaks off into bronchioles, which I would kind of look at like your hand is breaking off into these bronchioles. And at the end of each of these bronchioles are these millions and millions of alveoli. So all along the way, all up to here, we have been cleaning, warming, and moisturizing the air, and now the air hits the alveoli. Another thing we don't often think about is how many muscles are involved. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but the muscles in your neck are involved in breathing. They're also involved in swallowing, so there's a lot going on there. The intercostals are muscles that wrap around your rib cage. The diaphragm muscle we talked about already. And then you have the abdominal wall, which is composed of so many different muscles that run up and down, side to side, and diagonally. And all of those were working to accentuate the breathing process. So we inhale the air in. Now we have the gas exchange process. So simply stated, the oxygen moves from those alveoli that are fully expanded, jumps across that thin layer of moisture, warmth, and into the capillaries. Amazing. Can't explain it because it goes beyond my knowledge, but just phenomenal science there. And if that's not enough, at the same time, carbon dioxide is going in the opposite direction from the capillaries into the alveoli. The heart then is monitoring these percentages of acid and base balance related to the oxygenation. So this is even wilder science, is that it's constantly monitoring that, and then based off what the heart is measuring, it's sending out the commands as to what we need to do about it. So let's see then what else the heart is up to. So the heart is a double pump, and when you look at a heart, it does have 2 sides to it, a left and a right side, and one of them pumps the oxygenated blood out to the body. The other pumps the carbon dioxide blood out into the lung so that the lung can then detox that through the next exhale. So this circle goes on and kind of creates a figure 8, which I am going to try to draw for you at this moment. So let's see how we do. And here we are. We've already talked about the lungs. And we talked about what coming in? O2. Now, the oxygen is now inside of the blood supply and it's going toward the heart. Okay? The heart is taking in this oxygenated blood, measuring the percentage of it, and saying, oh, that is good blood. Let's get that out to the organs. This breaks down to every little cell we have, but the organs, super clear to us what that means. Our organs need this oxygen. So our organs happily accept this donation, and they are sending forward the used blood back to the heart. Carbon dioxide, if we let that gather up too much, that's a toxin. We don't want that in our body. The heart takes that in, definitely senses that amount of carbon dioxide and sends it out into the lungs, and then the lungs exhale. All right, so we now understand how the inhale and the exhale are involved in how the oxygen gets to the organs. So it's an amazing thing that begins from your first breath and ends at your last breath. For us as a company, the most important thing we work with is what's going on over here, okay? So if we can maximize what's going on over here, how is that impacting what's going on over here, right? So if you've ever run into a little old person who barely takes in a deep breath at all, they're like right about here, it makes a lot of sense as to why organs and things are not running as well as they used to. Now, of course, everybody ages, but just the idea, or you might end up running into somebody who's not that old, who breathes very, very poorly, and organs do not work that well if they do not have good oxygenation. So this is just a really basic concept to keep in the back of your mind when we're working on breathing. This is why. Okay, let me shut this down, and we'll go ahead and move forward. The exhale we just talked about, it's mostly passive because you have a positive pressure in your lungs, and now you're going to release that, kind of like letting air out of a balloon. But a lot of times we're real lazy about our exhale, and we don't want that. We want to use our abdominal muscles, pull them in, and push that carbon dioxide air out of us. So remember, it's a detox moment. It's one of the best detox moments in the body. So we want to keep a really good pulse on our exhale, which is why we make you wear the breathing belt and keep you honest as to whether you're really using those belly muscles or not. So let's keep going. And our next topic is about how the autonomic nervous system balances this breathing. So what we know is that breathing is a constant swing between sympathetic and parasympathetic, literally swinging every 10 seconds. When we inhale in, our autonomic nervous system says, oxygen, I can relax. When we exhale out, we start to get a little air hunger. Our autonomic nervous system says, I need oxygen, give me the next breath. And we swing back and forth in this range. That is a nice practice, and we can widen that swing by making our breathing in and our breathing out more optimal. When we widen that span, we increase resilience. So this is a huge concept to think that I can change my resilience with my breathing. Yes, and that is what we're seeing in numbers, what we're seeing in science, and that's what I'm trying to explain to you in pictures and words today. The autonomic nervous system is never off duty. It keeps the breathing cycle going continuously. When you are sleeping, it's so interesting. Sometimes you'll go into deep breaths while you're sleeping, and other times you'll be like breathing so fast. And that's all being managed by the autonomic nervous system. You're not thinking about it, you're sleeping. But it's the breathing pace that you see during a sleep cycle is completely related to the stage of sleep that the person is in. And if they're in a deep sleep, they're going to probably be breathing slow and deep. But if they're in REM sleep, they're going to be running and jumping and doing all kinds of crazy things in their mind, and it's going to force that rapid breathing pattern. So really, really interesting how the autonomic nervous system manages that for us. But where we think of it is, if you think like a metronome or a swing set, we want to give you the opportunity to determine how high and how wide you want to swing. And in the optimization process, we're thinking swing higher is better. Like, so we want this big wide swing. So we want to start that pattern for the autonomic nervous system within the simple act of breathing. So Many of us don't even think about our breathing because we are doing fine without thinking about it. But if you ever run into a moment where your breathing is interrupted or negatively impacted, you will think about your breathing. So some of the common issues people will have is bronchitis. Everybody's probably had that as it goes around in the fall and in the winter, and you can't get a full breath. Smoke inhalation, that happens. You don't have to be in a terrible smoke incident, but you can get where it's tough to breathe. If you burn something in your stove and your kitchen is full of smoke, you can feel that. Or if you're underwater, and like we always loved when we were kids holding our breath underwater, and you sense that air hunger. It makes you aware of how important your next breath is. And if you knew anybody who went through respiratory distress during COVID-19, you're familiar with the importance of the breathing. Sometimes we humans just need to have a lack of it to gain appreciation for it. All right. So what we want to do is talk about the inner armor belly breathing. So what we do with inner armor is we use technology to help individuals become more aware, first of all, and then to become stronger in this. So obviously we want to engage the diaphragm, and we use the abdominal muscles to also be symbiotic with the diaphragm muscle and make this air really move. And so the goal for this is to get consistent and powerful breaths, not like a giant breath like when you're going to blow out candles, but more of a consistent mountain up and then emptying out. So some of the benefits of the deep breathing, I already said it, was that we expand the parasympathetic and sympathetic range. So when you can train your body to do the deep breathing, you build cardiovascular resilience, which is so amazing, but we measure it with the finger sensor, and we can see the heart rate varying with each breath, and we can increase that span. And when we do increase that span, then we increase resilience in all the parts of the body, not just like, oh, I'm mentally strong. It's like your immune system, your mood, your performance is all improved when our heart rate variability increases. We also can improve our health. Heart rate variability correlates with overall better health. I remember once reading about insurance companies that actually use heart rate variability as a marker for life insurance. It's also a huge marker for the recovery from heart attack. And if your heart rate variability is higher, you have a much better chance of recovering from a cardiovascular incident. And now we even know, based off of a study out of UCLA, that increased heart rate variability with breathing training has shown to decrease the circulating biomarkers for dementia. Absolutely amazing. These are biomarkers that people are like trying to develop drugs for, and the simple act of breathing is showing that it can reduce this within something like a 6-week span of training. So the thing we do not want to see is low heart rate variability that signals stress and exhaustion and indicates that a person is either crashing or has crashed and needs to recover. And the way you start to work with a low HRV is through deep breathing. Deep breathing also physiologically stimulates the vagal nerve. The vagal nerve is the relaxation nerve in our body, and it extends to all organs, but it especially is involved in our gut and our gut health. So the simple act of breathing and filling the lungs fully actually puts a physical pressure on the vagal nerve and stimulates it. It's almost like a vagal nerve massage. So super cool way that one system is impacting another system. And one of the words that's going around a lot is mindfulness. And I just wanted to connect inner armor breathing with mindfulness. So We love the idea of mindfulness. The thing that is difficult about mindfulness is there is not a known measuring or an objective piece of data. So typically in mindfulness, you're going to do an exercise and you're going to say how you feel before and after. But with inner armor breathing, the way we like to look at it is that we're measuring the mindfulness through our tracking. So we're able to look and see with the deep breathing, are we actually producing a different state? And we can track the HRV to monitor that. And we can actually understand with the breathing technique, if we're getting our breathing technique consistent, then are we changing the autonomic nervous system from that sympathetic to parasympathetic state? All of this kind of cracks me up a little bit because we're like a tech company, but we're really working off of science that goes back thousands of years, that the yogis would practice their deep breathing and achieve these states that we're using all of our technology to reach those. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means we're doing the same thing that they did, and we actually have data to be able to show it. All right, so heart rate variability is a big hot topic. The thing that I want to just touch on is the heart's rate will respond to the breathing. So when we say we're going to work heart rate variability, we're really speaking about working the breathing. So the goal in heart rate variability for us is to achieve coherence with the heart and the lung, so that they're holding hands, they're working together, they're strengthening each other. So for us, heart rate variability as a marker is a result of this coherence. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. The two have to hold hands. When they hold hands and work together, the heart's rate will vary the most. And that's what you want, because that's the greatest efficiency for getting the oxygen to the organs. I think that would make sense to y'all if you think about that infinity graph again. Okay, couple additional focus techniques we use at Inner Armor. These are taking it to the next level. Temperature is biofeedback's oldest measure. It's just very obviously linked to the cardiovascular system because we talked about the capillaries and how the distance of the cardiovascular supply goes all the way down to those tiny little capillaries. So when you put on that finger sensor, we are measuring not the measurement of if your body core is warm. We are measuring if your circulation is going to warm all the way to your fingertips. So it's a huge marker for autonomic nervous system parasympathetic activity. That's a fun one, and it's pretty basic science. Then we take it to the next level, turn it into electricity, and we're looking at skin conductivity, and that is related to actual moisture coming through our little teeny tiny pores, and it's extremely reactive. It's the same measurement that we use for a lie detector test, but it is like the ultimate signal of if you are in a parasympathetic state. So we're going to work our breathing at Inner Armor until we can get this skin conductivity to a point where we are proving we are getting in a parasympathetic state with that breathing. So then we like to pair them together and have the temperature and the skin conductivity for the ultimate like crazy person in the zone. I call them the closer. That you can get both of those markers working together through the act of breathing. So it all goes back to breathing. So in conclusion, we see the breathing, the role of breathing is first to survive. But beyond survival, breathing is foundational for your resilience and your health. And I could list lots and lots and lots of things behind that, but I think you also could do a little Google search and list the same list because this is all very well agreed upon. Inner Armor breathing, to me, is the pathway to mental, physical, and emotional stability. So I hope that from the point where we started today to the point where we're finishing, that you can connect all those dots and understand why we would say that Inner Armor breathing is the pathway to mental, physical, and emotional well-being.